Shalom. So, I am doing a second episode in my series, Why is Protestant Theology So Bad? And the answer is Mike Winger. I did one previously, and obviously, before you start saying why somebody's theology is bad, you have to first prove that, in fact, their theology is bad. And obviously it is, but let's make sure that it's clear why we say that. Now, I am going to mostly focus on Mike Winger's bad theology, but this is a twofer. Here is bad theology from a CRC minister. And when I tell some people, especially knowledgeable people, that Christians make the mistakes that they do, which are so obvious and which they should not do, other people will claim that I am strawmanning them. So here is the proof that I am not actually strawmanning them. We're going to listen to two Christians say, and I mean, so apparently she's an ordained minister at Ann Arbor CRC. So supposedly she knows what she's talking about. And of course, Mike Winger has over 400 and almost 450,000 subscribers. This video of his 20 questions has 4,000 likes, and I'm sure tons and tons of views. So I'm not just strawmanning. There are actually Christians who are this bad at their understanding of the Bible. So here's Pastor Kristen saying things that are obviously false.
At this point in the gospel, in salvation history, the Jewish community believed that God dwelt uniquely with Israel.
The Jewish people have never, ever believed that God dwells uniquely with Israel. And that is obvious from our entire Bible. Again, you can't possibly read the Old Testament and not read the parts where it says that my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples, right? So Isaiah is not some new thing that, Christianity brought into Judaism that nobody heard about. And in fact, even the Sadducees took sacrifices from Gentiles at the temple, as we know happened historically, right? So this idea that the Jewish people, yes, we still believe that we have a special relationship with God, that our relationship with God has its own special place, but that doesn't mean that everybody else does not, because guess what? Shocker, we're monotheists. And so we believe that our God is the only God. This is the whole point of the entirety of the Jewish Bible, is that there is one God, and that God is the God of every single nation. And when something happens to the Gentiles, it's because the God of Israel is the God of the Gentiles, and he treats them fairly. And the God of Israel is the God of Israel, and he treats us fairly. And if we do evil, then we will be punished. And if we do good, we will be rewarded. And the same is true for Gentiles. You cannot possibly read any of the Old Testament and not understand this. Yet, you have Christians who say this as if it's even plausibly true, and it's not. All it is ignorance. And again, when I get caught in this place where some Christians will tell me, no, you're straw manning Christianity. She's actually saying it. And this is something you can actually find in the letters of Paul, because he was not aware of Judaism and had never read the Old Testament, obviously. And I'm not joking about that. And that's why you get Christians saying things like this, which is ridiculous.
They had good reason to believe this.
No, nowhere does Judaism teach this.
They had been taught this in their study
Who taught this?
of Torah.
Of Torah. Don't even use that word. That is not what the Torah teaches. Yet you're using the Hebrew word to try to explain as if this is what Judaism teaches. Judaism has never, ever, ever taught this. Ever.
That God dwelt uniquely with God's people Israel, that God kept covenant with Israel, that God
kept covenant with Israel. God kept covenant with everybody. There is the covenant of Noah, chapter 9. That's not just with Israel. There's the covenant between the pieces with Abraham's children. And while, again, Beni Bechori Israel, right? Israel is God's firstborn. That does not mean that the other nations had other gods which were valid gods. No, we are monotheists. This is the definition of monotheism. There is only one God. But
God would not leave Israel, though they would leave him.
that's
Those
true.
outside the covenant community of Israel were unclean.
Where did you get this? Where did you get this? Melchizedek was not part of Israel. Even Bilam, who in fact was unclean, but he still got to speak with God. This idea that there can be no righteous Gentiles is a slander on Judaism, and the slander is claiming that we are not monotheistic. We are monotheistic, and there can be no clearer proof, no clearer result of a belief in monotheism than the belief that all human beings were created by the same God. That is the innovation and genius of Judaism, which is there is only one God. The one God created all of humanity. Therefore, all of humanity has our one God. This is the core of Judaism. And in fact, if you read Rashi on Deuteronomy 6:4, which is the creed of Judaism, Shema Israel, hear, O Israel, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad, right? The Tetragrammaton, our God is one God. He actually says it there. That's to understand that indeed our God is the only God. That is the fundamental understanding of Judaism and monotheism. So this is just pure BS.
They were outside, they were apart, and even the way that the worship ended up being structured, the sanctuary spaces, the temple, there were outer courts for the Gentiles.
There were outer courts for the Gentiles, as opposed to there being no courts for the Gentiles. The temple had courts for the Gentiles. Do you understand what that means? If we actually believed what she's trying to say, which is that a Gentile can have no relationship with God, why would we have courts for the Gentiles in the temple? Hello, are you listening to what you're saying?
And those who were Jews could come in closest, but those who were not would stay out.
Could come in the closest, but everybody got to come in. That's the point.
There is a minority, well, there's an alternative or a quieter story also in Scripture, where we see the evidence of faithful foreigners showing up alongside the people of Israel also.
Really? We didn't notice this. Like, all the Jews who read their own Bible just didn't notice this. This wasn't something that, like, the Jews who studied their Torah noticed. We're just idiots? We don't actually read our own Torah? That's what she's saying. We didn't notice the Gentiles. We didn't notice Melchizedek. We didn't notice Noah. We didn't notice that we believe in one God.
The story of Rahab comes quickly to mind.
Really? Rahab? Is that in the Jewish Bible?
God's grace seeped out from Israel.
Really? So there's only one God?
Even if they were not expecting it themselves.
We were not expecting it, but it's in our Bible. Why weren't we expecting it? And in fact, we were expecting it. Guess what? There are many, many verses in our Bible which constantly say, in Ezekiel, Zechariah, Isaiah, all over in the Torah itself, right? Which says, you shall not mistreat the foreigner because you were foreigners in a strange land. This is our Torah. And you have the chutzpah to tell us that we believed something that our Bible is against, and then try to prove from our Bible that we were wrong. This is what drives me nuts.
The promise of God's activity in the world, even then, could not be contained only to the people of Israel.
Really?
Nevertheless, you could
We
say
never
the normative way that God worked in the world was through Israel, and that
look at human history. You're a Christian. And remember this when we go over to Mike Winger and he starts talking about the stuff that she should know.
is where we find the disciples in this story today. When Jesus landed in the area of the Gerasenes, the disciples in the boat had just come off what you would call a rough night.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to Mike Winger. You can listen to more of her stuff if you want, but I'm not strawmanning Christianity. She's a CRC pastor. Now, for Mike Winger talking about Jews.
Skill Mage says, what's your understanding as to why the Jews don't believe in Jesus and are waiting on someone else? I think primarily it's tradition.
No, it's not tradition. No. For 2,000 years, Christians have been forcing Jews to listen to like missionaries would come and preach in our synagogues. So the tradition is Christians coming and oppressing Jews and trying to impose their religion on us. That's the tradition. That the tradition is forced baptism. and then when Jews did in fact convert, not accepting Jews as converts. That's the tradition. So it's tradition. No, it's not tradition. It's not tradition. And I will show from your own Bible, from the Christian Bible, which you would expect a Protestant to have read, how wrong you are. But let's listen to what he's saying.
I think okay, you asked my understanding on this. I think the majority of Jews don't really know a lot about Jesus. When I've heard from those who were Jews.
Yeah, but that's because we listen to Christians and we believe them. That's why we don't know much about Jesus, because we believe what Christians say about Jesus, and we don't recognize what Christians say, like Jesus is God. That's the problem. You're an idolater telling us the exact opposite of what is written in our Bible, which is God is not a man. The exact opposite of everything that Judaism teaches, which is God is not a man. You believe that a man is God, and therefore it is completely outside of anything acceptable to somebody who actually believes in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible. Because the one thing that the Hebrew Bible stresses over and over again is that there is one God, that he is ineffable, that he is not a man. It says that. It actually says those words. And the response I get from Christians is, when it says that, it doesn't actually mean what it says. It actually, it's just like if I say I'm not a mouse, that means that I'm not cowardly, right? So it doesn't actually mean that I'm not a mouse. But if I were a mouse, could I say I'm not a mouse? Like, hello? It says quite clearly, God is not a man. This is the fundamental belief of Judaism. God is not a man. And you're telling me God is a man. Guess what?
And then came to the Messiah, came to Christ. They talk about how they had really very, very shallow understanding of Christianity and of Jesus in particular.
Well, the ones who convert had very shallow understanding of Judaism.
One Jew said that he thought that the New Testament was literally a set of documents about how to persecute Jews.
Have you read the book of John? Gospel of John? Have you read it? Have you read? I think it's Thessalonians. Have you read the horrible anti-Semitic things that are in the Christian Bible? They exist. Look at them.
And it was when he opened up the Bible and he reads Matthew and it starts with the genealogy and he starts to realize, wait a minute, this entire thing was written by Jews.
Well,
Matthew is like written about Jesus, a Jew.
Supposedly it was written by Jews, but it was at least edited by non-Jews. Let's put it that way.
Writing about a first century Jew who claimed to be the Messiah, which is not actually considered that bad in Judaism to claim to be the Messiah.
No, it's not.
Maybe you are. They're okay with that.
We are.
In Judaism, the current tradition in Orthodox Judaism is if you are a Messianic Jew, it's fine as long as your Messiah is not Jesus.
No. As long as, and I'm actually going to have a Messianic Jew on my channel to clarify this. The problem is not Jesus. The problem is idolatry. The problem is not Jesus. The problem is idolatry.
So there's been rabbis even recently who some Jews say, hey, I think that's the Messiah. And then they're fine with it. They're like, yeah.
Yep. And that's in Acts 5.
You're still a Jew. Of course you're Jew. But when you put your faith in Jesus
as God,
that you're not even a Jew anymore.
Yep. If you have a different God, if you believe that a man is a God, you're not a Jew anymore. Yep. You are denying the fundamental core of Judaism when you believe that God is a man.
You're not a Jew anymore. Even if you're continuing to observe traditions and things like that.
Yeah, it's not good enough. That you can keep all of the Torah if you don't believe in God, the one ineffable creator God, then yeah, the rest of it is just dressing.
And so this is a hotbed for general cultural confusion about the nature of the New Testament, about who Jesus is, about what he claimed. If you can be a Jew and believe in any old Messiah, but not Jesus, him specifically,
not Jesus as God,
you can't. Like, what's going on here is something strange.
Yeah, you believe that a man is God.
Something strange. Maybe this is like a spiritual darkness that's happening.
Yep, it is definitely a spiritual darkness that you believe a man is God. That's idolatry.
And it's very sad. It's not something anybody's happy about. We want to share the Jewish Messiah with...
The Jewish Messiah is not a God. The Jewish Messiah is not a God.
The Jewish people. He's their Messiah. You belong here, y'all. You belong here trusting in Jesus, your Messiah. What reasons do they give? They'll often give reasons like, well, the Messiah is not going to die. He died.
Yeah, well, I mean, that... yeah, that's a reason people give. And yeah, I mean, it's not the big deal. It's a convincing argument, partially because when Christians say Jesus is the Messiah, what they really mean is Jesus will be the Messiah, because of course Christians don't believe that Jesus fulfilled messianic prophecy. Obviously he didn't. Look out your window. This is not the world that... So yeah, that just doesn't work, right? So when Christians say Jesus is the Messiah, what they really mean is Jesus will be the Messiah. And because of that, there is a complete disconnect. And that's why it's very easy to say to a Jew, like, you think Jesus is the Messiah? Like we live in the Messianic era? You're crazy. And that's why it's a convincing argument, although I mean it's based on a misunderstanding. When Christians say Jesus is the Messiah, they don't actually mean that he is the Messiah. They mean he will be the Messiah.
And he died by crucifixion. Like, God would not allow that to happen. But this is modern rabbinic. Okay, let me just go through a quick timeline for you, right?
And this is where he absolutely goes off the rails. I have actually explained this timeline to PBK, and he's like, what? I have explained this timeline to so many people, and they're like, what? But yeah, here's Mike Winger giving you that timeline. It's shocking and sad.
Old Testament Judaism is one thing, right? When you get to the first century, when you get to Jesus's time, it's a slightly altered version, but it's still relatively Old Testament. They're still observing the feast the same way. They still kind of have, they just have these Pharisees and these Sadducees who are kind of like adding a lot of traditions. But at its core, it's still Old Testament, OG Judaism. And then you get to the time after the New Testament, the destruction of the temple in 70 AD.
The destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And I guarantee you that he read something where it said Rabbinic Judaism and the synagogue services and modern Judaism started after the destruction of the temple, which it did. Which temple? This is where he's forgetting that the time of Jesus was what's called the Second Temple period, right? So, spoiler alert, First Temple gets destroyed. There's a 70-year interregnum in which the prophets establish modern Judaism, what I would call rabbinic Judaism, with synagogue services and with all the beliefs that the prophets taught us about how to live without a temple. And then the Second Temple was built, and because nobody, and I do mean nobody, thought the Second Temple was the temple. And the funny thing is that the earliest recorded history of this tradition I can find is actually in the book of Hebrews, which is in the Christian Bible, not in the Jewish Bible. So the belief was, and this was a tradition, right, that the Second Temple, because it was not truly a temple, that it would be replaced by a temple not built by hands. And the earliest recording of this tradition I can find is in the book of Hebrews. But it is something that we in Judaism believe, partially because the Second Temple was not built to the specifications that are in Ezekiel. It's either Ezekiel or Zechariah. I believe it's Ezekiel, right? So, and we have records from Second Temple and previous times where people were like, yeah, this isn't the temple, right? And so synagogue services continued. during the time of the Second Temple, exactly as the prophets taught us. And after the Second Temple was destroyed, Judaism continued to keep those things which the prophets taught between the destruction of the first and the second temple, and that is modern Judaism, the synagogue services, right? But he's gonna tell you this absolutely ridiculous, and I will show from the Christian Bible, absolutely ridiculous story about what happened with the destruction of the second temple in the year 70. And this is why Protestant theology is so bad.
Now Judaism goes through a radical revolution, and a new type of Judaism emerges called Rabbinic Judaism.
He's off by at least 300 years. I won't get into the exact timing. He's hundreds of years off. Hundreds of years off.
Where they reimagine Judaism with no temple and no sacrifice.
With no temple and no sacrifices. You know how it says in Hosea, take with you words, and we shall pay with the calves of our lips? You know how Isaiah talks about, what house will you build me? Why do you trample my courts? You know how the prophets taught us after the destruction of the first temple how Judaism is to exist without a temple? This is what he's claiming happened after Jesus. And I will show you from the Christian Bible how this is ridiculous, and anybody who actually even knows their Christian Bible, forget about actually knowing their Jewish history and the Old Testament. All you need to do is read the Christian Bible, and you understand that all of this stuff is ridiculous. But why is Protestant theology so bad? Because he's had to figure all this out himself. He is not standing on the shoulder of giants. And that is why he makes mistakes like this. Because if he were standing on the shoulder of giants, right, I wouldn't need to go around correcting every single Protestant pastor individually. He would know better than this. Or institutionally, right, their distributed cognition as a group, they would realize there would be people who'd be like, hold on, this doesn't make sense. And I'll show you from the Christian Bible why this can't be.
And so good works take the place of sacrifices in some ways. And at the
Hosea, take with you words. Take with you words, and we shall pay with the calves of our lips. And this is also why he doesn't seem to understand why you can't be Jewish when you are an idolater. When you believe a man is God, no matter what you do, what other thing you do, when you believe that God is a man, or a man is God, you've completely severed that relationship with Judaism.
Same time, they're pulling away from Christians who are saying this is the real Messiah, Jesus is the Messiah, and they're creating something that's meant to be distinct from that. So this is created as a reaction. Rabbinic Judaism is radically different.
Rabbinic Judaism has in fact reacted to Christianity as Christianity has reacted to Judaism. That's not the point. The point is the story that he tells of the timeline that he tells doesn't even jive with the Christian Bible.
You know, if you meet a modern Jew who's even Orthodox, they're not Old Testament style, man. They're rabbinic, post New Testament style. And
this is the story that keeps on getting told, and it's absolutely misleading. Because guess what? Yes, Judaism, of course, has changed over the past 2,000 years. Of course it has. How could you expect Judaism to be precisely how it was 2,000 years ago? It couldn't, and it shouldn't, and it wouldn't. But we wear phylacteries like the Christian Bible says. Jews during the Second Temple period, during the life of Jesus, wore phylacteries. We wear fringes on our garments. We have mezuzot. We keep kosher. We keep the Sabbath. We go to synagogue, not the temple. We go to synagogue like Jesus did and Paul did. We are the actual continuation of Judaism as it existed before the destruction of the Second Temple. And I'll show you from the Christian Bible.
And one of the things they were believing when Jesus was alive was that the Messiah could die. This was
okay, this is a whole thing. We can go into Mashiach ben Yosef, all kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter. And I'll show you from the Christian Bible why the Jewish position is it doesn't matter. You're making it about the Messiah when it's about idolatry. It's not about the Messiah, it's about idolatry. Again, it's not about the Messiah, it's about idolatry. You can believe in everything else in Judaism. You can be an Orthodox Jew in every other way. If you believe that a man is God, you're no longer a Jew. You're no longer treated as a Jew. You are a meshumad. You are somebody who has been spiritually destroyed. Because that is the point at which you have denied that which is most fundamental in Judaism.
This was a debate because they saw passages in the Old Testament that recommended that the Messiah was going to suffer and die. So they tried to reconcile this. There was the two Messiahs view.
There were actually the three Messiahs views, and there's still the four craftsmen. I mean, the Bible talks about the four craftsmen. And because you don't understand what the word Messiah, the word anointed means, that's why you have this problem.
This is in Second Temple literature, in between the First and the Old and New Testaments. And they were like, hey, there's going to be a suffering Messiah, he'll die. And then there's going to be another Messiah who comes and he reigns. So they had a two Messiah perspective, at least some people did. This is because the idea of the Messiah suffering was something that they saw in their scriptures. Now, however, all those passages like Isaiah 53 in rabbinic Judaism, it's ingrained. If they talk about it, they always say, oh, it's Israel. It's not about the Messiah. It's only about Israel. The suffering Messiah it's just Israel. We're the ones suffering. Even though that completely contradicts the passage.
No,
and that's
it doesn't
not the
contradict
common
the passage
historical
at all, but I
understanding
don't
if you
even
go
want to
really
get
back
into
in
that.
the rabbinic writings. I've done research on this. I'm not just making stuff up.
You've done
and so
research on
all
this,
that's
and I believe you that you've done research. You're not making stuff up, but you're relying on your individual self, and that's why you make these mistakes.
say. The less informed Jews have shallow confusions about Christianity. Oh, it's anti-Jewish. Oh, and don't get me started on the Catholic Church and how they've helped promote this. Forgive me, Catholic, I'm not trying to attack you here. Historically speaking, just go read the papal bulls. Just spend a few hours one day reading through the historic papal bulls, and you'll see the animosity between official, Roman Catholicism and Judaism has been intense. And it went both ways, but this has left historically, and then look at even, and that's not only, even in Protestantism, there's been plenty of anti-Semitic stuff that's just burned bridges. So the belief is, shallow belief under many modern Jews is that Christianity was anti-Semitic at its core.
It's not a shallow belief. I've seen the Gospel of John.
It's about as Semitic as it gets at its core, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, Jesus was a Jew. Then you had Paul.
I have a Jewish faith. I'm not a Jew, but I have a Jewish faith. I have a Jewish Messiah. And
that's the problem. You don't have a Jewish Messiah. You have a Gentile Messiah, because your Messiah is God. That's the problem.
And I think the Jews are a blessed people whom God has called to know him and love him, and they've just missed their Messiah. And I just hope they come back. And those who have, and there's plenty. There's more Jews following Jesus now than at any other time in history. So that's a wonderful thing. So all that to say, there's that sort of animosity towards Christianity. Then there's like, Jesus is the exception to the rule. He's the one Messiah you're not allowed to believe in. And
that's not true. And I'll show you from the Christian Bible why that's never been true.
Also a reimagining of messianic prophecy to try to make sure that you can't use those passages to talk about Jesus. That's happened in rabbinic Judaism over time.
No,
there's some of those
the
answers.
Two Messiahs
if you guys want more on this, I recommend it's a 5-volume series now, Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus by Dr. Michael Brown. It's the best thing I've seen on the topic. The best thing I've seen on the topic.
The best thing on the topic.
Not only reasons, but it reasons in kind of 19 verses 1 and 2.
Okay. So that was his thing. Now, let's start with Jesus is the only person who can't be the Messiah. Acts chapter 5, verse 12. And by the hands of the apostles were many signs and wonders wrought among the people, and they were all with one accord in Solomon's porch, that's part of the temple, and of the rest durst no man join himself to them, but the people magnified them. And believers were the more added to the Lord, multitudes both of men and women, insomuch that they brought forth the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, that at the least the shadow of Peter passing by might overshadow some of them. There came also a multitude out of the cities round about unto Jerusalem, bringing sick folks, and them which were vexed with unclean spirits, and they were healed every one. Then the high priest rose up, and all they that were with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and were filled with indignation, and laid their hands on the apostles and put them in the common prison. But the angel of the Lord by night opened the prison doors and brought them forth and said, Go stand and speak in the temple to the people all the words of this life. And when they heard that, they entered into the temple early in the morning and taught. But the high priest came, and they that were with him, and called the council together, and all the senate of the children of Israel, and sent to the prison to have them brought. But when the officers came and found them not in the prison, they returned and said, and told, saying, The prison truly found we shut with all safety, and the keepers standing without before the doors. But when we had opened, we found no man within. Now, when the high priest and the captain of the temple and the chief priest heard these things, they doubted of them whereunto this would grow. Then came one and told them, saying, Behold, the men whom ye put in prison are standing in the temple and teaching the people. Then went the captain with the officers and brought them without violence, for they feared the people, lest they should have been stoned. And when they had brought them, they set them before the council, and the high priest asked them, saying, Did not we straitly command you that ye should not teach in this name? And behold, ye have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine, and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, We ought to obey God rather than men. The God of our fathers raised up Jesus, whom ye slew and hanged on a tree. Him hath God exalted with his right hand to be a prince and a savior, for to give repentance to Israel and forgiveness of sins. And we are his witnesses of these things, and so is also the Holy Ghost, whom God hath given to them that obey him. When they heard that, they were cut to the heart and took counsel to slay them. Then stood there up one in the council, a Pharisee named Gamaliel. This is Gamaliel the first, not Rabban Gamaliel, who is his grandson. So there was Gamaliel, Shimon. So Rabban Gamaliel figures very prominently in the Talmud. This is Gamaliel the first, his grandfather. A doctor of the law, had in reputation among all the people, and commanded to put the apostles forth a little space, and said unto them, Ye men of Israel, take heed to yourselves what ye intend to do as touching these men. For before these days rose up Theudas, boasting himself to be somebody, to whom a number of men, about 400, joined themselves, who was slain, and all, as many as obeyed him, were scattered and brought to naught. After this man rose up Judas of Galilee in the days of the taxing, and drew away much people after him. He also perished, and all, even as many as obeyed him, were dispersed. And now I say unto you, refrain from these men, and let them alone. For if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to naught. But if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it, lest haply ye be found even to fight against God. And to him they agreed. And when they called the apostles and beaten them, they commanded that they should not speak in the name of Jesus, and let them go. And they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. And daily in the temple and in every house they ceased not to teach and preach Jesus Christ. So, Judaism, like he kind of sort of said, you want to believe somebody is the Messiah, you may be wrong, but not the big deal, as Gamaliel says. Because if it's true, yay, great. And if it's not true, God will take care of it. That's not our problem. That's not what we care about. And if you merely, as a Christian, believe that Jesus will be the Messiah, like most Christians believe, okay, not a problem. What is the problem is idolatry. That's the problem, is idolatry. And it's always been the problem. Because idolatry, the Trinity, tritheism, is absolutely against everything that the Bible teaches us. Now, as far as his timeline, Luke chapter 4, let's start at 16. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, so and so. He went to the synagogue and read from Isaiah. Where did this come from? Where did this come from? You were telling me that Judaism during Jesus' time was OG Old Testament Judaism, and then the temple was destroyed and the Jews knew not what to do. Where did the synagogues come from? Oh, wait. Where did the synagogues come from? This isn't after 70. This is when Jesus was still alive. Oh. Acts chapter 17. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the scriptures. There was a synagogue of the Jews in Thessalonica, and it was Paul's custom, whichever city he went to go to the synagogue. By the way, there were synagogues in Jerusalem as well, even during the time of the Second Temple. I hope it's absolutely clear how his silly timeline does not fit with even the Christian scriptures. And why is his theology so bad, so clearly wrong, so obviously wrong? I would say it's because, as a Protestant, he's relying on himself, and he's and his theology is obviously flawed. This obviously flawed. Please like and subscribe. Daniel Abraham says, interesting. I wonder what you think about Catholic theology next. It's not nearly as bad as Protestant theology, but close. And I would say Eastern Orthodox theology is even better from everything I've seen. I mean, I don't know actual Eastern so Eastern Orthodoxy is so varied and diffuse, and what we see is in English. So I don't know how Eastern Orthodoxy generally exists, but the Eastern Orthodoxy of Father Stephen and Bo Branson and the channels I make videos of, they're not nearly as bad. And I would say part of that is the fact that they are made in combination. It's not a single person reading the Bible and relying on themselves, but somebody actually engaging with the entire tradition. I think a Catholic would say God was not a man in the Old Testament, But in the New Testament, he incarnated by taking on a human nature. My biggest question to that supposed argument is, why was God so mean as to be so adamant? And I looked up on the internet to see like what the Christian answer would be to, okay, you see the entire Hebrew Bible, right? The entire Hebrew Bible is constantly telling you God is not a man, God does not have a son, God is incorporeal, right? It's the theme of the Jewish Bible. And then Christianity comes along and accepts all the idolatry that the entire Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, is constantly railing against, right? So my question is, why was God like, why couldn't he like give Jews a hint, right? Why in every way does God absolutely forestall what those things which Christianity claims are fundamental? Why doesn't he mention the Trinity, right? God could have talked about the Trinity through Moses, couldn't he have? And in fact, Eastern Orthodox with their theophanies and stuff, like, why did God not teach this stuff before? And a better question, why didn't God even teach it in the New Testament, right? Why isn't the Trinity in the Christian Bible? Forget about the Jewish Bible. It's not even in the Christian Bible. And I think the answer is that obviously the Trinity and this idolatry was a result of the growing perversion of Judaism as it became more and more Gentile. Okay, I think the charge of idolatry would hold only if we say it is impossible for God to take on a human nature. But wouldn't that limit his power? No. So one of the oldest questions in theology, can God create a stone so heavy that he cannot lift it? No, God cannot create a stone so heavy that he cannot lift it, because that's not describing omnipotence. It is describing an absurdity, right? So if you define omnipotence as absurd, guess what? An omnipotent God will be absurd. So if you are going to have a definition of omnipotence that is not absurd, then God is omnipotent in that he is able to do all things, but that doesn't mean absurdities, right? So a stone so heavy that God can't lift it, that itself, it's a contradiction, right? That itself is a contradiction. And to define omnipotence as the ability to be absurd is to destroy the definition of omnipotence. So can God take on a human nature? I'm going to give you a shocking answer. Yes, God can take on a human nature. God cannot become human. I hope you understand the distinction there, right? So we say love is God, God is love, love is not God. God is love is not idolatry. Love is God is idolatry. Man is made in the image of God is not idolatry. God is a man is idolatry. Why? Because God can express himself, and this is where we get into the whole thing of, yes, Judaism believes that in a multi-personal God. Now, you have to use the weird definition that Trinitarians use of the word person, which turns the burning bush into a person of God, right? So the burning bush, because it represented God and it said, I am becoming that which I am becoming, ahiyeh asher ahiyeh, right? Therefore, it is a person of God because God is expressing himself to Moses through the burning bush, right? That is what Christians mean by person, right? So in Judaism, we believe in a multi-personal God because God can, in fact, be represented, represented, right, through a human being. That's not a Christian idea. That's a Jewish idea. That's not John 1. That's Genesis 1, right? Human beings are made in the image of God. God is revealing himself to the world through human beings. That's Genesis 1, not John 1. Okay? The problem is, if I were to say, if you were to throw some water on the burning bush, and even if it did go out, if you were to say that I killed God, right? So the idea of deicide, which is something Christians believe in, they believe in the concept of deicide, right, is blasphemy. That's blasphemy. God cannot die. That is the same thing as God creating a stone so heavy he can't lift it, right? If God were to die, everything would cease to exist. It's very good to see you, Kalev, my friend. Why didn't he give the law to Abraham? We actually believe that he did. Surprise, surprise. So we believe that something special happened on Mount Sinai when God revealed the Torah and spoke it, and it fundamentally changed reality, right? But we also believe that the Torah is eternal and came before creation. And so it did exist before creation, and that it was in fact known in, I mean, how exactly is a whole other thing. But the idea is that the 5 books of Moses always existed, right? And yes, this is something that rabbinic, this is a constant topic of a rabbinic discussion, exactly how and how that is. And I mean, it's a big discussion, but ultimately, it's funny. I was talking to Father Eric about Plotinus and Neoplatonism, and so he said, because I was told that Aquinas introduced Plotinus and Neoplatonism to Catholicism, and he said, no, actually, Augustine said that Plotinus. So Augustine said, I read Plotinus, and within Plotinus, I heard, I read, in the beginning there was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Whatever it says in John 1. And So, which obviously means that he understood a new understanding of John 1. John 1, properly understood, could be a very Jewish idea. And there is an idea which I could be convinced of, that originally the Johannine corpus was in fact written by Jews and was then rewritten by anti Semites. And I think that's probably correct. This is, again, what Sam calls my idea of a Kabbalistic lab leak, which, yeah, I do. Oy vey. I, I just saw a picture of. Let's hope this. Yeah, this looks really horrible. The Twitch, whatchamacallit, like, changes on a regular basis, and sometimes it just looks really bad, and here it looks really bad. Anyway, sorry. I hope all of that was clear. I'm just looking to see. Well, there are a bunch of people watching, so those people who are watching, if you have questions, comments, etc., please do let me know. Otherwise, I am going to continue to look at stuff on the internet. No, thank you. Hey, Charlie. Well, there's a bunch of you watching, so if anybody wants to actually ask a question or make a comment or come on, you can DM me and I will send you a link. Otherwise, I will probably go offline. Hey Roman, I've heard the whole den of merchandise scene is actually a response to the corruption of the space for Gentiles around the temple. I could believe that. Hi, does your synagogue take a position of above what? A position on abortion or gun control or other such matters for you to follow? Well, um, depends which synagogue you're talking about. So I've done videos on the abortion stuff because it touches seriously on Judaism, and frankly, the rabbis hate. So on Tanakh Talk yesterday, which is a channel which does very similar things to what I do, just a lot better than I do. They had Rabbi Federo on, who he's actually a Reform rabbi, but he's kind of a conservadox Reform rabbi, and they were asking him about abortion, and he was trying to explain, but he was also very frustrated, as basically all rabbis are when you come to talk about abortion in Judaism, because obviously a lot of people say a lot of stuff that we are so somebody somebody had posted this horrible meme where there were three rather unattractive, supposedly Jewish feminists. Jewish life does not begin at conception, and Baruch Hashem for abortion. from Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. They have these signs, Baruch Hashem for abortion. And I mean, this picture is just so yuck. It's on BOM in the political memes channel. Gregory posted it yesterday at 4:44. And obviously that's just ridiculous and horrible. At the same time, Judaism's view about abortion is nothing like the Christian view of abortion based on Bible verses. We do not believe, might as well take this off. We do not believe that the life of a fetus is the equivalent of the life of the mother. We take far more nuanced position on viability and when life begins, to the point where, and I haven't been able to find this, but Ben Shapiro has variously been accused of heresy for his position on abortion because it is too strict. Rabbi Breitowitz discussed this issue, and it's available on YouTube. The Jewish position on abortion is nuanced and complex in ways that nobody likes, and everybody likes to misrepresent. And unfortunately, it's mostly the Christians who are upset at Judaism for not taking the position that they would like us to take, which is this is a complex issue that must be nuanced, and as a religion, we refuse to take either the pro-life or pro-choice decision. What do you mean in ways nobody likes? So if you look at the political spectrum in the United States, right? The people who are supposedly pro-choice are people who are like, third trimester abortions, let's abort Down's syndrome babies. And it's like, third trimester abortions? No, like, eek. Like, that's getting, yeah, I figured. Hey, Aaron. I didn't realize you were in the Chicago. Now I'm trying to, oh, right. Your picture looks nothing like you, by the way. Yeah. Now I remember. Yeah, your picture online looks nothing like you in real life. Fix it. But ways nobody likes. So no version of Judaism, not Reform, not conservative, not Orthodox, not ultra-Orthodox, takes the position that is the supposed pro-life position, which is the Christian position, which is even if the life of the mother is in danger, then it's a toss-up somehow, right? So that's when you would make a choice. No. In Judaism, that's no choice. If the mother's life is in danger, and what exactly that means for the mother's life to be in danger, the mother's life comes before the life of the child. An unborn child is not equal in life to a independent human being that's alive. So like a woman whose life is in danger and she's told by doctors, you need to have an abortion or you're going to die, and she refuses to have an abortion, really in Judaism would be considered a suicide. And if we still denied Jewish burials to suicides like we should, then she would be denied a Jewish burial, right? And like the pro-life is like position is like, what? No. And generally, like even the ultra-Orthodox parties in Israel are not opposed to things like the morning after pill, because we do have this concept of progressive, like it's more and more of a life. So the morning after pill arguably is discussed in the Talmud and allowed, right? So like abortion up to let's say 5 weeks, 6 weeks, pretty much everybody's going to say in Judaism that almost a choice. Obviously in Judaism, so it is considered a sin in Judaism for me to destroy this pen without a good reason. It is considered a biblical prohibition, right? So the Bible says when you go to war, you shall not. When you go to war, you shall not. Your device is not attached, so that's why it's not working. Yeah, you don't have a mic or a cam. That's why it says it's not working. Although I see you trying to get on. It says, when you go to war, you shall not destroy the fruit trees. And the rabbinic, cut down the fruit trees. Thank you. We teach that is an absolute prohibition of needless destruction in Judaism, right? And so certainly just willy-nilly destroying potential human life is absolutely forbidden in Judaism, absolutely forbidden. And the people who like to pretend that Judaism has some sort of pro-abortion, like I've seen people claiming that like abortion is, hey, there we go. There you are. Can you hear me? Your mic's off.
I can hear you.
And your mic's on. Hey, how you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing all right.
So yeah, and like Miles said, your position on difficult issues like abortion seems great to me. I agree with Judaism and its nuanced position, but when you look at what's actually going on in our society, both the pro-life and the pro-choice people get mad at the Jews because we refuse to endorse their positions.
I'm going to admit I have a bit of dysphoria or a disjunction when it comes to discussing difficult issues like abortion, because when I talk to people in real life, it's not so crazy to me when I talk to them in person, but it is people online who seem crazy to me. So I'm sort of wondering how much of this has to do with the fact that online people are just a completely different animal. They're an entirely different human being online. You talk to them in person, something changes, and I don't know what that is. I don't know how that happens, but I sort of wonder if some of the contentiousness from people online is because it's online. I know it's in person. I know some of it is in person because I have friends who
Right.
have prayed at certain like public events, and they've gotten into it with people. It's just I've not seen it myself personally, so it's a bit of a
It's so okay. There is the part, and actually, I was talking to Caleb earlier about this a long time ago, actually. But so you'll notice that when you're behind a steering wheel, you will get much angrier at people cutting you off than you will if somebody bumps into you, right? And I think there is some of that going on, that that glass barrier, that physical barrier somehow makes you more militant. But I think what's going on even more is selection bias. The people you talk to in real life are going to actually tend to have much more moderate views than somebody who feels so strongly about an issue that they are going to go online and discuss it in, especially in a place where, so the people who are pro-life, so strongly pro-life or so strongly pro-choice that they're going to go online and discuss it are going to have far more extreme positions than just people you would meet in a general audience.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, I can't say any of my family spent a whole lot of time posting and chatting online, so I know that all of them have a bit more. They just approach the issue very differently when talking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and that's part of the whole thing of trying to make our community an actual community, right? So I don't know if you saw in the Bridges of Memeing channel, people were discussing Eric Weinstein, and
I hadn't seen that.
okay, so people started discussing Eric Weinstein, and my response was, you know what? I don't want to get into a huge argument about Eric Weinstein, but he is somebody I consider a friend of mine. Like, we went out to a beer. I do
Oh,
like,
you met him.
yeah,
Yeah, awesome.
I've met him. Like, I actually do text back and forth with him every once in a blue moon. Like, he knows who I am. So like, I cannot just let people casually on Bridges of Meaning have like say things that I wouldn't allow people to say in my presence about my friends, because
Yeah.
Bridges, like, I'm not going to go all over the internet and confront everybody who says crazy things about Eric Weinstein, but in a community where people know me, Eric Weinstein is one of my friends.
Mhm.
Right? And I think that's part of it just being very, very different how
Well,
we
yeah.
interact with people in real life than random anonymous internet posters.
Well, that's something that I actually think that's something you do need to teach people in real life, though, too. People in real life go around friends, they'll talk badly about someone they know, and then I think it's more a maturity thing where they won't, they want to be sort of ingratiating to the group, and then they won't just, they'll talk about badly about someone they're friends with, and then they'll talk to that person next day like nothing happened, and it's like, no, you gotta stick up for your friend when you're in a group and people are talking badly about them. It's something that people don't learn enough in today's society.
Yeah, I think this goes into Jonathan Haidt's whole thing about how we're raising children, and those children are not learning how to have interpersonal relations because all of their interpersonal relations are being mediated through computers, especially women, but also young men, and just learning to interact with other people well is something we're not teaching our kids, because there's too much helicopter parenting. There's not letting kids resolve issues between each other, not letting kids of various ages play with each other. So he's been discussing this a lot with various people recently. So
There's this.
Miles,
Yeah, you're going to talk about
says,
Miles.
do you think that Jesus saying I am the way, the truth, and the life is just saying he is a pretty good God image to look up to, as opposed to a claim that he is God? Yeah, that's precisely what I think. I think he was speaking as one with authority. And I think that a rabbi needs to, in fact, speak as one with authority, saying, I am teaching you that which is right and the way onto God. And if you, and no, I mean, so on Friday, I'm going to talk about the Rebbe because Saturday is his Yortzeit. And frankly, I think the Rebbe was a rabbi par excellence in every way. And he did not spend his whole life, he did not mention hellfire and damnation very often, but he mentioned it enough. He spoke as one with authority who said, you know what, I do know some things are right, some things are wrong, and I'm not, and if you do that which is wrong, that is going to be deleterious to you. And so in a sense, saying I am the way, the truth, and the life as a rabbi, as one with authority, is nothing I find in any way shocking about Jesus. And I certainly don't think it's any sort of claim to divinity. But the Gospel of John, in many places, claims certain things about Jews, which I think the editor of the Gospel of John certainly thought of Jesus as some sort of divine figure, and tried to put, this is what I call the crayon, tried to take what Jesus said in certain ways. What do you think, Aaron?
Well, I don't know. Is that something that rabbis would say often? I am the example, because that seems I can't think of any teacher I've ever met or anyone I ever know that says I am the example that you should look up to. That just seems sure. Like a little like, unless you really are God's, or at least you are truly like, not even the saints will ever say anything like that in Orthodox tradition.
Will they or will they not? I mean, again, you're taking an interpretation of it, which I agree. The editor of the Gospel of John certainly seemed to have of it, but I can see it very easily being, look, I am telling you the way, the truth, and the life. And if you do not listen to that, you're risking hellfire and damnation.
But he didn't say, I am telling you. He said, I am. So that's...
Again, this is the Jewish concept of agency, which I think too many people, like Christians, have this problem also with the angels in the Old Testament, and even things that happened with David or with Moses, right? I think there is a Hebrew concept of agency where a prophet will say, right, thus said the Lord, I am, right? And I think that's considered perfectly fine in a Hebrew context, in ways that when translated, Gentiles took to mean something completely different.
You think there's a translation issue is where Jesus said something to the equivalent of thus says the Lord in this translation here?
Well, stronger than thus says the Lord, more like, hey, if you don't listen to me, like I am teaching you the way, the truth, and the life. Like
you're still conflating another verb in there for I am, because I am is not in any way a weak verb in
So there
like
actually is no verb to be in Hebrew in the present tense.
okay.
So
So may I
it's
ask
actually impossible to say I am in Hebrew.
so may I ask then the name of Yahweh, the one who is, the one who was, and one who is, I'm not
Right.
sure how that goes, but
Okay.
you know
Yes.
more, so
Yes.
you can clarify.
So I actually think this is related. The fact that there's no present tense. So the name of the Tetragrammaton is in fact related to the word to be in Hebrew.
Hmm.
Yet the word to be is uniquely the only verb that has both what's called a perfect, which is a completed action, and an imperfect, which is an incomplete or future action, right? It has both. It has both of those, but it has no real present tense. And so when the verse, it's funny, when I was in college, one of my college roommates, when I told him there's no present tense of the verb to be in Hebrew, because I was taking Hebrew at the time, he's like,
Hmm.
but that can't be. Augustine has this whole treatise on why it says I am who am, and it's not in the future, it's not in the past, it's in the present tense. And he showed it to me, and my response was, well, I guess Augustine is an idiot. Because the actual verse is ani ehye asher ehye. It's not even ani, it's ehye asher ehye, which I usually translate as I am becoming that which I am becoming, because it is in the imperfect. Ehye
Hmm.
is in is in the imperfect. And we do say about God that hu haya hu hove hu yihye, he was, he is. But the way we say he is actually a kind of a construct. Hu yihye, he will be, because really when we say hu hove, right, we are saying he is present, like, because there's just no to present tense of the verb to be in Hebrew, right? So if you want to say I am tall, I am, well, tall is what, gavoa, right? Ani
Small
gavoa.
small thing, but Jesus was also speaking Aramaic at this time. He would have been familiar with Hebrew, I assume, as a rabbi, but he would have been speaking Aramaic, so
As
I'm not sure
far
if
as I know, there's no present tense of the verb to be in Aramaic either. My Aramaic is not as strong as my Hebrew, but as far as I know, it's the same. And Aramaic and Hebrew are very, very similar.
so. Do you suggest that there is a different translation here?
So one of the points that I like to make a lot is, have you heard of the Peshitta?
No.
The Peshitta is the first translation of the New Testament into another language, and it was actually a translation from the Greek into Aramaic. So the obvious question becomes, how do you know that it's a translation from the Greek into Aramaic as opposed to just the original Aramaic, right? And I was
Well,
wondering that myself until I actually
there.
went and looked at it. And it is very, very obvious that it is a translation from the Greek to the Aramaic, because they go out of their way in ways that are almost comical to change what. So you know how Jesus keeps on referring to himself as Son of Man? And I
Yeah.
have a video on this called the Son of Man debate. Well, their translation from the Greek back to Aramaic is in one place bare din danasha, which I would translate as his son of that there man, right? Because if you were to read, if you were just to translate back into Aramaic, Jesus says something completely different. And I generally think that those things, when I try to think of the Aramaic as opposed to taking the Christian word for it, Jesus is speaking very differently. So this is part of my whole thing where I think, and I realize this is offensive and I'm sorry, but I think it's true. Vast majority of Christians do not know enough about Judaism to understand their own Bible. Jesus, I think Christians completely misunderstand Jesus.
I don't know. I'm not like a lot of what you're saying to translate things is it's not something I have a lot of engagement with, unfortunately, because I don't have that background. So I don't know if I can do a lot of back and forth there. All I can say is that I mean, I can't think of any teachers I know of who would say I am the example that you should follow, or that I don't know how that would sound in another language, but like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this actually is there's a lot of things, there has been a lot of ink spilled on a lot of this stuff, that I have found myself stumbling on. Like, if I was truly the first person to say a lot of the stuff that I'm saying, I would think of myself as being like, you know what, either you're crazy or you know, but I'm actually not the first person to say this stuff. There are not many, but there are people who have said similar things, and these discussions are in fact discussed by academics. Jughound, I'm not sure I've ever seen you before. I don't know if I know who you are. Isaac's oldest son is the Sasquatch people. Ask the Native Americans. I did. I'm guessing you're talking about Esav and Edom. Yeah, not sure. I agree with that. Although I've been talking to some Mormons lately.
I thought you were talking about Esau.
Yeah.
And that's, or Esa, is that?
The Hebrew is Esav, and
Okay.
he is also called Edom, which means red. Yeah. And so Esau, I guess, is I always forget. But I was talking to actually a Jew who converted to Mormonism today. So Miles says, some say Jesus went to what is known as India for some years. Did other Jews go to India 2,000 years ago? Any Jewish stories about ancient India? I don't think India, certainly, well, so there are people who claim to be descendants of Jesus's brother, who supposedly went on a missionary trip to southern India. Eastern India, as far as I know, is more of an actual area that there may have been some sort of back and forth with. There are definitely people who claim that Christianity made its way to India and southern India, I believe.
St. Thomas Christians.
Yeah.
And they're still around in India, or at least they claim as tradition that the apostolic father from whom they can claim apostolic succession is Thomas.
Right. Yeah. Roman, do as I do and say sounds extremely confident, but plausible for a teacher who thinks he's being called by God. Exactly. And that's what I would say a prophet does, in fact, do. And in fact, to some extent, a teacher. And I think it's, so I believe it's right there that it says people were astonished that he spoke as one with authority. And the fact is, my biggest complaint against most rabbis is that they do not speak as one with authority. They are too reluctant to actually say, you know what, this is right, this is wrong. So, yeah.
Again, I do want to emphasize, do as I do and say is not as strong as I am the way, the truth, and the life. These, like, saying that do as I do because it's good is the implication there. Be like me, and you would, like, this is, I am the truth. Like, that's, I don't even, like, and because the Greek word logos, I assume, I didn't read it in Greek because I don't know Greek, but man, I should have this discussion with someone who knows more history than I do and more languages. I'm not of any use here.
Hey, it's nice having you here. Roman. Yeah, it does sound like he's saying he's the logos there. And the idea of a rabbi living the Torah in reality is not a it's not foreign to Judaism. Like living the Torah. One of the things I say is that if you go to a Jewish service, you would be forgiven for making the mistake of thinking that we worship the Torah scroll. Obviously, we don't. And the reverence due to a person who actually lives the Torah and is a living example and a living teacher of the Torah, as opposed to the Torah scroll is higher than the Torah scroll, not less. But that's a Greek idea, not especially Jewish shrug. Again, so, I mean, the concept of logos. So Philo of Alexandria spoke about that before Christianity. And my idea of the idea of the Kabbalistic lab leak, sort of like how Christians call the Bible the Word. Yeah, basically, yes. I think that is an ancient Jewish idea. Go ahead.
Well, another thing is that I remember reading in Tom Holland's Dominion him talking about how in the early, when the Romans had conquered Egypt, well, before then, really, there is this growing idea of, at least in the Greek-speaking world, especially around Alexandria, this trying to merge this idea of a loving God who truly cares for all humanity, but he was very specific to the Jews in that he loves the Jewish people and watched over them. And there seemed to be this growing sense in the way she was describing it in the Dominion, where there's a need to unify the Roman world in the terms of like, because Roman ruled for over so many nations, there is an attempt to try to bring everyone together under one ruler. And at least in the immediate sense for the emperor, it was a cult of the emperor where everyone would worship the emperor, and that would sort of unify the Romans. But there was also a sense that they were looking for, at least some people, a way to bring Judaism into the Roman world in a way that would fit towards everyone. That's again what I remember reading. Did you read Dominion?
I did not. I do want to read it, but I have a very long reading list that I'm not getting to at all.
That doesn't surprise me.
This was actually the subject of my earlier rant today at the very beginning. We are monotheistic as Jews, and being monotheistic, we believe our God is the God of the entire world. And so the concept that God has a special relationship with the Jews is part of Judaism. Yes, it says, Beni Bechori Israel, my firstborn son is Israel. But we believe that that's just a historical fact, that God presented himself to Israel and that we have been privileged, and it is a privilege to actually be used for the rest of the world as a firstborn child, for the entire world to get to know God. But like it says in Isaiah, my house, I believe it's Isaiah, my house will be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Like I am constantly quoting Zephaniah 3:9, that the whole world will serve God with one accord. The Jewish God is a universal God because we are truly monotheistic.
Yeah, I mean, we are too. Greek Orthodox believe very much that God is God for the whole world. And so I guess what you're saying is that that concept must have existed to some extent at the time as well. But
I think that when Paul talks about, for example, the Gentiles being adopted or grafted in, I think that's because he was not Jewish. Because the idea that they are adopted, right? Like who was their father before, right? What tree did they belong to before, right? Yes, in Judaism we believe that, like he says in other places, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile, and we do believe that we are the firstborn of God. But that's just a historical fact. I mean, as a Christian, you kind of believe that as well. Jesus was a Jew, right? So it's this idea, and that's what I like. This live stream was actually the first thing I refuted. Was there was this CRC pastor who was talking about how the Jews in their Torah had learned that God doesn't really care about the Gentiles, and it's like, no, we never taught that. We never believed that. I can see from places in Paul where you would believe that, but again, I think that's Paul being polytheistic. And yes, I am not a fan of Paul of Tarsus. You may have noticed.
Yeah, no, it's came through a little bit, but it just seems like the Christian conception of Paul is very similar to the conception that you have of him. I just don't see a whole lot of conflict between your problems with him and the way that we conceive of him as largely being the left hand of God's. When they say that he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, when you say he wasn't a very good Pharisee, never seemed to indicate to me that he wasn't a Pharisee. It just meant that he was like, you've met people who, let's say, are very gung-ho for a cause, and they may not know a whole lot about that cause, but they know they believe it very strongly and are very gung-ho and in favor of some cause or other. And there's very chaotic people out there who believe something very strongly, not quite sure why they believe it, very sometimes intuitive people who just get swept up into their emotions and go towards something. In that sense, you can say that someone is a Pharisee of Pharisees because they go for it hardcore, but it doesn't take away from his not understanding of the traditions very well, or B, his commitment to the cause. And then finally, when you get to his becoming Christian, it is in the character of how he acts as a minister, acts as a priest, like a missionary throughout the Roman world, and how he talks about it. Because there are these, like, this contradiction is with Paul as he's going as a missionary, this attempt to sort of tension, let's say, between Judaism and the bringing the Gentiles to the faith, and like, what is the faith going to be? Because in some people, this is something that Tom Holland talked about in Dominion. Some people he's trying to discourage, like, you don't need to do everything as the Jews have done and do all of their practices. And to some people, he's trying to tell them to straighten up.
So,
And
I mean,
so,
Father Stephen certainly has this Paul within Judaism view, which I prefer Christians believe to what I believe is the actual truth about Paul. And so I think it is a possibly defensible position that Paul was within Judaism. And I think Father Stephen makes a great argument for it. I just don't find it convincing as an argument. Partially, I mean, in Acts 22, Luke has Paul claiming that he studied at the feet of Gamaliel. I don't believe that's true. When I read the book of Philemon, which is a letter in which Paul returns a slave, an escaped slave, to his master, and Paul does not mention the prohibition of doing that in the Torah. Like,
all right.
it's one thing to say, I'm not going to follow the law. It's another thing not to even acknowledge the law.
If I may ask, though, was the slave a Jew? Because that would be another relevant part of
No. It's not. That's not relevant. No. An escaped slave that comes and finds refuge in Israel. The Bible categorically says you shall not return. I mean, there's all kinds of things, but no. That's not. He was. I mean, he should have addressed it. He should have at least addressed it. And he didn't even address it, which makes me think he didn't even know the Torah.
Again, there's also something that needs to be considered, that not all Paul's writings have survived. So I'm not claiming that there is some secret hidden writing. I'm claiming that, well, I'm just saying that I don't know that he didn't do it either. I'm basically saying that, I don't know. I'm saying that I don't know. That's
So
your argument against it is, it would make sense with all the facts available, that you would expect that to be done, but I have too much skepticism over the things that I don't know to really say, yeah, I'm going to go for that argument. I'm just going to have to say, there's a lot of things I don't know. And one of them is the church fathers assembled the Bible and all the letters of Paul that have been passed down through the ages. And you keep the things that are important and you get rid of the things that aren't important. A lot of those Christians that were passing down letters through the ages were not Jews. They did not recognize the importance of the Jewish law in the same manner. And the things that they passed down through the ages reflected that, because they understood the law basically as the New Testament was the Old Testament revealed in the manner, and the Old Testament was the New Testament concealed. With that framework, they interpreted the letters. And so understanding that, it is likely that, or I would, at least in my mind, it is possible that a lot of them did not think it was important from their point of view. So if they were Jewish and remained Jewish, that would be important. But they weren't Jewish, they were Christian. They had become a new people, and their values had, I wouldn't say it, well, I won't say anything about their values, because now I'm trying to bite off more than I can choose.
Well,
only to say that,
so in Acts 23, James accuses Paul of teaching Jews not to circumcise their children, and the Paul within Judaism idea is that when Paul denies it, which I think is very clear that he does deny teaching that he wasn't lying. The traditional Christian view has been that, in fact, Paul failed to confront James when he should have. And I think the fact is Paul's just a liar. That's my very different view from both of those. Romans says Paul's supposed to be in jail in Philemon. How's Philemon supposed to take refuge with some dude in jail? It's against the law to even tell a guy to go back to his master and send him with a letter when you can't take him in because you are in jail. I'm not aware that Paul was supposed to be in jail in Philemon. I guess maybe that's true. But when it comes down to it, yeah, I see no reason to send us. So this comes to part of. So there are a few relationships we say that are analogous to God's relationship to Israel, which is father, son, husband, wife, master, slave. And so within the Torah, there is a real sense in which a master takes care of the slave. And when a master fails to do his duty by a slave, the slave goes free. So, for example, if you knock out the tooth of a slave, the slave goes free, right? And so there's this constant idea of this relationship between God and Israel, and so when the slave flees, you do not return him because it is an indication that the master has violated the type of relationship that is okay. And again, there's the whole exodus from Egypt and escaping from slavery, right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing. Yeah, it's a whole relationship that Paul seems unaware of. And in other places, like he says, there is no slave or freeman in Christ. He says that if you are a slave, you should remain a slave. He just seems completely unaware of this fundamental in Judaism. And John actually has Jews saying, we have never been slaves, which is heresy in Judaism on par with a Christian saying, who's that Jesus guy? Because the concept that we ourselves have been slaves, right? That I was freed by God, that from slavery in Egypt. If I have not been, I would still be a slave in Egypt. And that now I am a slave to God. There's the verse in Psalms, I am your slave, the son of your female slave, right? I was born into God's slavery. This is an essential belief in Judaism that I think just did not translate. The Gentiles did not understand when they took over Christianity. And that's why John, at least the editor of John, and I believe Paul, were just completely ignorant of basic fundamentals of Judaism.
Okay, what letter of John was this?
This is it's in the Gospel of John, I believe, chapter 7.
7. Just also, it's like 11 o'clock for me. I really need to go to bed.
It's late. It's John 8:33.
8:33. All right.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. It was very nice talking to you, Aaron. I will talk to you later. I'm going to go to.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to go to. It was really nice, everybody who joined us. I will talk to you later.